Going on tour as a band or musician can be a huge undertaking. And without proper organization or preparedness, it can turn into a massive mistake. A music tour, if you're not familiar, involves a band or an artist traveling around one or multiple territories around the world and performing concerts or shows on a recurring basis, typically night over night or over a series of nights with some off days for an extended period of time. A tour could last anywhere from 2 weeks to 2 years. Now, fun fact, according to the American Economic Liberties Project, in 2022, music touring, made up 95% of an artist's income. In fact, I recently posted a video on this channel about how music artists generate revenue both with and without touring. And if you want to see more about how to make money as an artist and how touring plays into the financial picture, I would check out that video, which would be linked somewhere on the screen. Music tours can be radically complex depending on the tier of the artists or the artist's preferences themselves, on the production goals, on the venue sizes that you're performing at. It can depend on the crew need. Organization really is the key to bringing it all together. So today I will be sharing some of my personal tips for how to organize a successful music tour that minimizes financial loss and stress while maximizes profits and enjoyability for both the artist, the band, and the team itself. A quick overview of my background. If you're new here, I am a full-time tour manager and come from about a decade in live event production. I'm the owner of The Final Advance, which is a touring and production operation company. And if you want to learn more about what we do, I do have a link in the description or on the channel to our website. I also recently published a guide for how to get started in touring if you wanted to learn more about sort of how the touring industry works and how to get involved. Go check that out. That is also on the website. Now, as you generate questions throughout this video, please put them down in the comments. I will be reading those. Also, be sure to follow the channel if you want to see more touring or music industry related videos. And if you stay until the end of this video, I will share what I consider to be my #1 most important tip when it comes to how I organize my music tours. So the first tip for how to organize a successful music tour is really going to be based around finances, specifically pre-show budgeting. So getting in and creating some sort of forecast, financial forecast for how much money the tour expects to make on this run. What I usually do is I create a full master tour budget forecast for every single date, and I input into that sheet all of the known costs, the things we know we have to pay already or things maybe we have already paid, as well as all of the guarantees. So looking at the deal memos and understanding how much money you're promised to make every show, as well as some potential bonus structure agreements. So I put that in comments as like, there could be a potential of this additional bonus being added on top of our settlement. This is also a time to run all of the costs for things like staffing and production fees. So if we know already that we're going to need an LD, a front of house, a monitor tech, a guitar tech on the run, we already know their day rates or their week rates, we can put that into a budget forecast and know exactly how much we expect to pay them by the end of the tour. Production fees could be similar. If we know we are buying a new banner or we're bringing in additional lighting or staging or truss, we can have a flat rate set for how much that rental amount would be or the purchase amount would be if we're buying, and put that into the pre-tour budget forecast so that we know exactly what we're going to spend. Personally, I always like to have a margin of error of 5% on all of my costs. So basically, when I calculate the total amount of cost that we're expected to pay, I add an additional 5% on top of that as sort of a margin of error, so that if there are some unexpected fees, we are sort of preparing ourselves for a worst case scenario. And by the time I have this pre-tour budget done, I usually go to management or to the artists and review with them what we're expected to make on this tour so that we can actually make decisions of like, maybe we don't need to add these things, or, you know, actually we're going to make a lot of money, so maybe we want to up our production a little bit. It just kind of, it opens the conversation so that there are less surprises down the road. The second tip for how I organize a successful music tour is to start advancing everything super early. And this isn't just specifically advancing with like the promoters or venues. This is getting ahead of all the logistics, including things like travel needs for flights and hotels for the band and crew if we have rehearsal days. When are we flying in, right? It's usually a lot more cost effective to buy those things in advance instead of the week before, so you can save yourself costs and have this sort of structured schedule already in place. Also advancing and getting ahead of all backline and production rental needs. So if you know you need to rent something, you need to rent a drum kit, or you need to rent some risers or something for the run, or maybe you need to buy something, getting ahead of that with your sponsor or with your rep is gonna set you up for success and not put you in a position where maybe last minute they don't have it and now suddenly you're scrambling, everyone's stressed, and you end up paying way more than you should. Advancing also comes down to getting prepared with your own crew and like advancing what your techs need on the road. So if you have guitar techs, drum techs, monitor engineers, front of house engineers, LDs, discussing with them exactly what they need for a successful run and getting ahead of all those purchases. Like if your guitar tech knows that you guys need more strings because you're going to run out by week 2 of tour, having that conversation early and placing that order with your sponsor or with your rep is just going to set you up for success. Advancing also means getting ahead of routing and shipping logistics for critical timeline dates for things like merchandise, for example. If you know you need a merch restock, or you know you're going to cross into Canada and then come back in the States and you want to avoid like the international tax thing, maybe knowing exactly where you're going to have your merch shipments land could be something you plan well ahead of time so that you're not having to worry about that on the road. And of course, advancing means actually getting in the weeds with the promoters, with the venues where you're having your shows, just to start having the conversation of like what to expect. That way, if there are any serious red flags, you can catch those early on and not find yourself in a surprised situation at a venue. The third tip for how to organize a successful music tour is to connect with the artists themselves or the bands that you're with for all things, including comfort and pleasure. Basically, when you're on tour, especially as a tour manager, like in my position, or if you're artist management, at the end of the day, you have to make sure your artist or your band is happy. You have to make sure that they are feeling prepared for the tour, because if they're not, then the whole tour is going to go south. So connecting with them in advance, there's the advanced topic again, can set you up for success in this category. So specifically things like making sure they have what they need to feel good on the road. If there's a certain like preference they have for types of food or types of drinks, or do they want the bus to move at night or during the day? Like what do they prefer, right? Getting ahead of all these questions and expectations will set you up for a less turbulent tour. Talking to the artist is also important because you can confirm what technical needs they have. In most situations, the like guitar techs, drum techs, Ableton techs should know what the artist or band needs. But ultimately, if the band or the artist wants to try some kind of new gear, or they want to add something to the performance element of the show, you should talk to them and make sure that that is being relayed and has been communicated to the team so that you don't go into a show with some mismatched expectations. And especially when it comes to working with the artists or the bands directly, it's communicating all of the expectations around schedules for things like travel, because a lot of these artists and bands are taking time away from their families to travel. And if you, for some reason, decided you wanted to have an entire week of rehearsals instead of just the usual 2 days, they may not be as okay with that as somebody else could be. And they need to be in the know and be prepared for that so that they are not caught off guard. And the fourth tip for how to organize a successful music tour is to get ahead of confirming everyone's responsibilities, like what everyone is going to be responsible for on the road. With most professional touring groups, like this won't be so much of an issue because everyone knows what they're doing. They know what they're getting hired for. But being the music industry, there are a lot of people who wear a lot of multiple hats, and that's okay. I personally don't believe in white glovers. I believe that everybody should offer some help in some shape or form on the road, because it's a tough task to be on the road for that long. And the more we can help each other, the more we can all succeed. But getting ahead of specific responsibilities is going to help smooth the process out and prevent things like drama on the road. So things like trailer pack, who is responsible for organizing the pack of the trailer? It's one thing to just throw everything in there, but if you have a full trailer, you have to have a system for packing it. Who is going to be that point person that leads that team? Also, merch settlements. Usually if you have a merch manager on the road, they are responsible for everything, but in some situations with bands that don't have that luxury, you have to decide who is going to settle the merch. Is it going to be you as the TM? Is it going to be the PM? Is it going to be the hospitality person? There's a lot of different folks that can do it, but just agreeing on who is going to do it is the important point here. Another one that comes to mind is like VIP wrangling. If you don't have a VIP coordinator on your team on tour, which a lot of bands don't, who is going to be the person that goes out and greets the VIP folks, that checks the list for their names, that gives them the merch packs, that escorts them in and lines them up and runs the photo line, right? Having that conversation ahead of time will just prevent any unnecessary drama or confusion on the road. I just want to add a quick note. This also includes discussing and confirming the responsibilities of support. So support bands that are on the tour. What do they need in terms of their production, in terms of their load-in, their changeovers? What are their responsibilities for what they're striking? What are they using with other bands? How does that relationship work? Just getting ahead of all those communications and basically walking through what a show day would look like is like gonna help and save you so much stress and headache when organizing a music tour. Okay, and if you stayed until the end of the video, I want to share my sort of personal tip for what I like to do to help organize a successful music tour. And this really stems from the financial aspect of like the pre-show budgeting. It's one thing to put in like the guarantees and the known costs for labor and production. Those are great, but I will always or almost always put in placeholders for some more like variable costs. Specifically things like local ground. Like if there's no ground in the deal offered, we may have to be calling Ubers for our drivers to the hotel, for, you know, getting to or from the airport. And those are going to add additional expenses that could radically change our forecast and budget if they're not accounted for. Another one is like fuel floats. So like how much fuel is your bus going to need? If you are really trying to get ahead of organizing a successful tour, you will calculate the mileage between cities with some margin of error, as well as understanding how much fuel consumption your bus or your trailer or your bandwagon or your van takes, and calculating how much fuel float you expect to use for each city stop or between each city. For like local ground, Ubers, Lyfts, I usually put like $100 per day or per show day. And it kind of balances out because when you're playing in busier markets or like bigger markets like cities, those Uber costs will go up. But then if you're playing in rural Virginia, those are going to go down quite a bit. Or you might not have any on one day and have a bunch on another day. And the intention is just to kind of standardize and create like an equilibrium for what you expect you will run up. And again, I always put the 5% margin of error because I'd rather be conservative in my forecasts so that I can be pleasantly surprised on the actuals. Well, thanks for watching, guys. That is basically how I like to organize a successful music tour. There are a lot of other nuanced things that I do that are very specific, and I didn't really get into them in this video. But if you have any questions, please put them down in the comments. I would love to check those out. Also, be sure to check out the Final Advance website, especially if you want to get into touring. There is a introduction to touring course on there that I think you would really enjoy. And please consider subscribing to the channel. It really does help the channel grow. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next video.